I wanted to start off with this because I thought this was interesting when I was talking to your mother, Esther, yesterday. She talked about how back, before you were even born, your mother and your grandparents immigrated to the U.S. in 1956. They left Budapest, and she was telling me just kind of the danger involved with that. So what do you know about, that time?
Growing up, my grandfather was amazing. He's probably the greatest man I've ever known, and he used to tell my brother and I like bedtime stories. We probably stayed at his house, my grandparents' house, once a week. And we'd always tell us stories, and he'd tell us stories about being in POW camp and being in the military and all the different things. And he'd oftentimes tell us family stories about how they escaped and what it was like and when they decided to go. And it was quite. Obviously, we were kids, so it was like a story. It was entertaining. But as you got older, you went, "Wow, that was real. That was my mom and my grandmom and granddad and uncle." So, kind of special.
When your family came to the U.S. for the first time, how much did they actually have?
Not a lot. They were immigrants and they were trying to make a better life. And even though they realized that they would have next to nothing, they also realized the opportunity that America presented. So, and they worked hard for it. By the time my grandparents passed away, they had lived a very full life and a rich life. And so, basically the American dream as we know it.
Your parents got divorced when you were 3 years old. Your mother had to work several jobs just to make ends meet. How tight were things financially when you were growing up?
Well, very. I think we knew it at the time.
You did?
Yeah, as much as you can know as a kid. But my mom did an amazing job of allowing us to have a good childhood. When my brother and I look back, I think we had a tremendous childhood. We had the typical American upbringing as we knew it. We never had holes in our sneakers, and we had enough food on the table, barely. But there was times when we'd get up and the pilots on the stove would be on because that was the heat, and the kitchen would be warm and the rest of the house would be cold. We were trying to save money, and we were latchkey kids, and we saw how hard my mom worked because she wouldn't get home. We'd go off to school. She'd get home at 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and there's certain periods throughout our childhood that she'd take up 2 jobs, but she's a very strong one.
What were some of the things that stuck out back then that made you realize you guys might not have had as much money as some of your classmates?
Probably lots of minute macaroni and cheese and
Really?
beans and franks for dinner a lot of times. And I think we grew up in a pretty cool town in North Brunswick because you had, socioeconomically, you had the haves and the have-nots. And when it came to sports, it was always funny because my brother and I played sports, a lot of sports, and there were kids on the team whose parents drive nice cars and lived in nice houses. And when you went for sleepovers, it wasn't a 1-bedroom apartment like we lived in, which my mom made into 3 bedrooms somehow. And there was these big houses, and so you kind of knew that there was a difference. But like I said, we had a great upbringing.
How'd she make the 1-bedroom into 3 bedrooms?
So that was back when 1-bedroom apartments had basements.
Okay.
And we had a basement. My grandfather came over and put plywood and sheetrock up, and the basement was a bedroom. And then when I got too old to share a bedroom with my brother, we took the dining room and we made it into a bedroom. So that was the 3.
Do you recall the Mexico national team story where you were given $10 per diem?
Yeah, that was, gosh. When I was a kid, that was I think my first trip was when we got per diem. I'm sure she told it better. I vaguely remember it.
Well, yeah, she said that, kids were going to Mexico with the national team, and everybody was given $10 per diem, which obviously isn't a lot for a trip like that. So all the parents, gave their kids extra money to spend while they were there, and you obviously weren't able to get the extra money. And not only did you not spend the $10 per diem while you were down there, but you saved it to come back and be able to, I guess, buy clothes for yourself.
Yeah, back then, money was obviously, we didn't have a lot of pocket money. So when my brother and I got it, we didn't we held on to it, tightly, and we spent it wisely.
How do you think the financial issues growing up helped in shaping you?
I think it humbles you. I think humility is important, and again, as much as we struggled, quote unquote, that struggle was really on my mom. She didn't allow it to spill over to us. So, I think for me anyway, I appreciate what I have, and I think that's a special gift because not a lot of people can say that.
Why soccer?
I don't know. I wish it was basketball, but.
You were a heck of a basketball player as well. You beat the former Bulls player Jason Williams in the game.
Yeah, he was amazing. Jersey produces a lot of talent, and I came up in a time when there was just everybody came to watch the New Jersey Tournament of Champions, and yeah, I love basketball. It's my first love, still is. But soccer was something that was just I was allowed to get all my energy out and run around and. Chase. I was fast. I was basically my son now. I watch him on the soccer field or my daughter, and they run past kids, and they don't really know much about soccer, but they have the athletic ability. So that was just a release. My parents put me in soccer because I was hyperactive and I needed an outlet, and that was the start of sports for me. I think age 6.
Were you noticeably better in soccer than the other sports?
Yeah, I enjoyed it all. I played baseball, basketball, and soccer, and. It just kind of stuck, I think the cool thing about soccer in New Jersey or on the East Coast, it's a fall and a spring sport. It kind of goes into summer as well. So I almost played all year round with indoor, mixed in. Back then we used to play in gyms. There was no AstroTurf, so it was something I could do all year round. I think that's where the passion. As much as I love basketball, it was like 3 months, and soccer was pretty much all year round for me.
So I know your mom says you didn't do all that well academically when you were growing up. So
yes.
you caused her many sleepless nights because of that, and then I guess the Tourette's as well. But she was talking about how she just was concerned for future career prospects, but soccer seemed like a good opportunity should your talent allow it. What sacrifices do you think you had to make growing up in pursuit of your dreams?
I think anybody who plays on a national teams, youth national teams coming up, and it's an odd sport in the way the seasons run, and for me, you just missed a lot of things as a kid, high school dances, time with friends, different things like that, which seems a small sacrifice now where I'm sitting, but at the time when you're a kid, those are important things,
right.
And so it ended up, for me, every now and again would boil over, and I would say, I don't, the heck with this soccer thing, I want to be with my friends, and I think that's when my mom her eyes would open really big and be like, no, you need to be able to play soccer and make something of yourself. So I'm glad she kept pushing me and kept me on the right path.
You ever come close to quitting?
Not that I can remember. I'm sure there were times where I didn't want to keep going. Again, probably out of the fact that my friends were in college having fun, and I was away on these crazy, silly trips at the time. I thought were crazy, silly trips to all these different countries, and what the heck am I doing? But I'm sure she'll tell you I was on the verge of it. But looking back, I can't ever remember being too bad.
The regional and state youth championships. Explain why you guys would actually play for penalty kicks.
Well, I had this coach, Tim Mulqueen, who's a dear friend. I love him, and he's the co-director of my Goalkeeper camp. And he used to coach us. He was wild and crazy back then. So he's toned it down a bit. I was good at penalty kicks. I guess like I said, I was athletic and explosive at that age, and I had a good penalty save record. So I think Coach Mulqueen at the time was what we called him. He used to just play for penalties and pack it in and see out overtime, and we'd win in penalties.
How would you describe the difference in popularity of soccer, U.S. relative to internationally?
I think the trouble with American soccer is it's not soccer itself. It's such a big country. You're talking about a sport that's relatively in its infancy. I know we've played it a while, and the league is 20 years old now, which is crazy to think, or something like that. But these other sports have been around for forever. And when you look at soccer, it's competing from a popularity standpoint at like number 4, number 5, maybe trying to compete with hockey, you know. Whereas in England, it's the number 1. It's the only sport. It's a country the size of Texas, maybe smaller, and it's the only sport. Everyone, men, women, kids, grandparents, everyone knows about football, something about it. Okay, they have cricket and they have rugby, but not even close. Those are a distant second and third. So it's the national sport. It's the blood and lifeline of English people, of Italians, of the French, of the Germans, of the Spanish. It's everything. The cities and towns and villages and the country stops, you know. And it's hard when it's hard from a popularity standpoint to compete when soccer is not our number 1 sport. When we have such a big country, the allegiances aren't as tight as some of the other sports.
Because we may lack the talent in soccer players right now, but it's not as if we lack the quality athletes. They're just
that's right.
in NFL and maybe not that many in baseball, but basketball and hockey. And so how do you get some of the other best athletes, as they're growing up? How do you encourage them to pick soccer?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think we need to. I think soccer at a youth level is very, very popular. It's one of the most popular youth sports. Right. I think America, as individual teams, as a league, as a country, as a federation, we need to get into the inner cities more. We need to get into the Black communities, the Latino communities. We need to have. I think when you grow up as a kid, you want to be who you see. I saw Michael Jordan on television. He was on all the commercials. I saw him on TV. You don't really see. Now we're starting to see soccer players on TV because it's cool. It's in fashion. But when I was growing up, we didn't have that. And I think that's how you get into kids' faces. You see Clint Dempsey scoring a bicycle kick on TV, and all of a sudden the kid says, "That's who I want to be. I want to go to those games." And that's how someone becomes your idol. Not blindly. You have to see it. It has to be in your face.
How much do you think it has to do with a lack of money in the sport in the U.S. Compared to the other big leagues?
I think it's a poor excuse, only because if you look at what basketball is and sandlot football and all the sports we know, you just get a ball and you play with your friends. When I'm in England, I'm in Manchester or Liverpool. Kids come home from school, they get their little clip-on ties, they put them on the floor and make goals, and they play in their school clothes until street lights come on. That's not a cliche. That's what happens. That happens even now. In America, we think of the sport as having to have soccer moms and jugs of sports drinks and all the uniforms paid for. It's too much. There's almost too much money involved in the youth side of the game, if that makes sense. Because when you look at soccer, it costs a fortune for a kid to go to the tournament, pay the dues.
Right.
LeBron James didn't have that. He just got a ball and played with his friends, and that's how he became great.
So you're in your early 20s, you're playing for the New York Metro Stars, now the New York Red Bulls, and you end up getting a call from the Manchester United goalkeeping coach telling you the club is interested in your services. Is it true when you get that call? Basically, you say, if not another thing happens, I could live on this the rest of my life? For sure.
I remember it clear as day. I was in national team training camp in January, the annual January training camp. It must have been 2003. I might get my years wrong, but I think it was 2003. In the January camp, we were in Bradenton, Florida, and I got a call. I had never seen the number before, and I picked it up. It was him. And it was almost Mission Impossible style. Like, there wasn't much of a conversation. He didn't need a call back. He was just saying, "Look, we're following you. There's nothing you can do. Just keep playing. Try to play well." And we're excited at the prospect of continuing to follow you and hopefully making something happen. That was it. And
what do you do when you hang up from a call like that?
Tell a lot of people. Tell my friends and family, and just put a smile on my face and boosted my ego, and it actually spurred me on because that was the beginning of a new season, so I was excited.
And to give this some context, Manchester United is probably the single most storied and popular team in all of sport. Yeah. So how long was it before you actually ended up getting signed?
Well, that was in January, and then we had there might have been another point of contact at some time I don't remember, but in May we played Mexico, and we played Mexico in Houston, and that same goalkeeper coach had called myself or my agent and said that he was going to fly over for the game, to watch the game and to meet with me briefly. We played well, I think the game was 0-0, and then that was it. Basically, they got the ball rolling. I saw what they needed to see, and then it happened so very quickly after that. I mean, by June or July, I was signed. I was on a plane, signed the contract, coming back over, packing up my stuff, and not that I had much stuff at that time. And then I met up with the team for preseason.
So in terms of your popularity then, I mean, and I guess the state of the MLS at that point anyways, you basically, you could walk down the street, go completely unrecognized. When you get off the plane in Europe, how quickly did you realize things have changed?
I kind of knew that my world was going to change, how much and exactly how, I wasn't sure, but I think I was preparing myself for, like, okay, things are going to change in a big way.
How did it change in terms of anonymity?
I think that basically everyone, without even having played a game, everyone knew who I was. In Manchester, at the restaurants, at the stadium for press day, and all the rest of it. People know who football players are, soccer players are in England. And so, again, without having even kicked the ball, there's so many more people knew my name than even they did in New Jersey.
I know your very first game in the MLS, Giant Stadium versus Colorado,
Yes.
Was particularly significant for you, but then also your mom, she told me she almost fainted the first time she saw you on the field. Your longtime friend and former coach Tim Mulqueen
Yes.
talked about how nervous he was just leading up to that game. But I wonder how that compares to your first game with Manchester United.
Yeah, very similar feelings, kind of trying to keep my head above water in the Colorado game, not having played before. Just trying to keep it simple and make a few saves and stay out of the headlines. And my first game for Manchester United was no different. Same butterflies, same nervousness. Questions of whether I could compete at that level. Again, another step up. Keeping it simple, trying to make saves. It didn't change. And but my mom, she'll get nervous on this weekend. So, I've played 600 games and nothing's changed. So, which is kind of funny.
How hostile will fans get behind the goal?
In England, very. They.
In what ways?
They're just passionate about their team and they say lots of things, and it's usually negative things I probably can't say on camera. But it's not just at me. I mean, as long as you're an opposing player on an opposing team, you're going to get heck, really.
How much are you able to block it out?
Yeah, now for me, it's no problem. Now I've played that many games where, you get hyper focused on the task at hand, and everything else is kind of a peripheral blur.
But you have said it's nearly impossible to stay focused for an entire
Yes.
90-minute game. So what will you think about at times?
Anything and everything. I've found a really good way over the years to kind of adapt to staying focused for long periods of time, and I think about anything really. Anything that pops into my head, it doesn't last very long. It's a fleeting
You got to
thought,
pick up the dry cleaning.
Anything. What am I doing next week, or something funny that a guy said before the game, or all sorts of crazy stuff.
You ever catch yourself daydreaming?
Again, if I do, it's a very fleeting, passing thought, because I have the ability now after so long to be able to stay focused.
When an opposing player is approaching, getting ready to take a shot on goal, what are you looking for?
Nothing. It's all instinct at that point. You see it so many times. That's why goalkeepers get better as they get older. You see it so many times. Thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. You see a shooter. You see his body language. You're just reading the moment and not really looking. I can tell you what I'm looking for now, but in that moment, I'm not actually thinking. I'm just trying to read his body shape. If there's an approaching defender, where the defender's coming from, that's going to help me get my angles better. Little things like that, but it's all instinctual.
How do you decide which way to dive during a penalty kick?
I don't know. I think sometimes you have a feeling about a guy, or maybe you've seen him, you watch highlights during the season like any other sport, and you see, oh, maybe he's gone right or maybe he's gone left. But I've had that in my head, and then in the game, something what I perceive to be something, made me clue into another way, and I change direction. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. It's a crapshoot, really.
How much video will you watch, and how does that actually help?
I think that's kind of been overplayed. I mean, there was a goalkeeper a couple of years ago who watched video, and then with all the technology and all the different tablets, you could watch it, live right before the game. I don't know how many people study it, because I think if that was foolproof, goalkeepers would start saving a lot more, and really our percentages are still down. So.
Okay.
Yeah, not a ton.
Okay, got it. And you made mention of this a little earlier. Goalkeepers peaking a little later on in their career. Most professional athletes, it seems, mid-20s, they're at the height of their performance ability. Yet with goalkeepers, it is 30s, even mid-30s. Why do you think that is?
I just think we don't have a lot of as demanding of a position as it is physically. We don't have a lot of miles on our legs. We don't do all the running, and it's a very mentally challenging position. And I think you mature and you get older, and as I talked about, you gain experience on actual match day thing. Shooters and the way they like to dribble around you or shoot. You learn all these things and you pick them up.
And you said you feel you're at your peak now. Why?
Just don't seem to be phased anymore. I'm at a place now where, there's nothing that I haven't seen now. When I cross the line and the whistle blows, I'm prepared for everything. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect or that I don't get scored on. That's not the point. The point is that prior to that, as you're learning, there's this small little uneasy feeling that something may happen that you're unsure about, that you're not capable of handling. Now that I've gotten older, I pretty much know that I'm not going to face anything on that day that I'm not prepared for.
You said on the field you're an actor, and that's really just used to motivate people. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I think anytime you see a picture of me or any highlight, I'm yelling at somebody,
But it's funny because I watch these TV interviews you do, and you're very monotone and calm, and then out on the, I'm getting a little emotion from you now, though, which is good. Yeah. But out on the field, you're
you have to be, from the goalkeeping position, the goalkeeper's a leader. The goalkeeper sees everything. We have the best perspective on the field because there's nothing behind us. There's no one running on the left or right of us. Everything's in front of us. And so you need to be a voice. You need to be kind of the coach and the leader, and you have to be the one pulling the reins, almost like a puppeteer. And when you I say it's an act because you have to, your presence has got to mimic the flow of the game. And sometimes, when I scream and shout, it's only for effect. If I think a guy is lethargic and not pulling his weight, I need to say something that's going to get an immediate reaction. And I think as players on the field, you have fans and they have opinions and they see certain things, and sometimes the crowd gets on your back. And if everyone's body language is really calm, even if someone made a mistake, it's really calm. It just it gives a very easy feeling. Where if the crowd starts to get on top of you and you're shouting at each other, and it makes for a very uneasy, emotional time.
But you weren't able to get on as your defenders as much 10 years ago as you are now, right?
No.
I mean, because you just didn't have the
clout.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you earn that. You earn that by playing games, by playing well. You earn that by giving respect. As much as you want to sometimes yell and scream and point guys in the right direction, you have to give them respect. And to be honest, 75% of the things I'm saying out there is positive feedback. Just don't.
Well, right. So how much do you get on your defenders when they mess up?
It depends how much they need getting on. If it's one, everybody's different. Some defenders will slip up and they'll hold their hand up and say, "Gosh, my fault," And other times, guy's head's in the clouds and doesn't know he messed up, or listen, I mess up too, so I'm happy for guys to get on me.
You've commented before, and I was shocked when I read this. I don't enjoy the game. I've never actually had fun within the course of those 90 minutes.
Yeah, definitely.
Why not?
It's too intense. It's too emotional. I think I enjoy the build up to it sometimes. Definitely enjoy the feeling afterwards of putting in a hard hard day's work, and hopefully if you got the right result, that means there's a bunch of things that went really well. I enjoy that. There's too much pressure on the game. It's work, it's work. It's a highly intensive chess match, physical as well, and you have to. It's like a puzzle you have to figure out. It's until you figure it out, it's not much fun. It's too intense, because even if you make a play, the athlete in all of us, the pessimist in all of us, knows there's still time on the clock. There's still time for the other team to do something great, and until that's finished, there's not enough time to enjoy it.
Why do you play if you don't enjoy it?
Well, I do. I enjoy the build up to it.
Okay, you just
and I enjoy the after.
Okay.
I just don't enjoy that 90 minutes.
Got it. Okay. You said before, if I woke up tomorrow without Tourette's, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Why not?
I don't know. It's who I am. I like who I am, and I've had success in my professional life. I've got the greatest friends that anybody can have. I've got 2 amazing children. I've got a great family. So I don't know. Life is good, and this is the only life I know. So I don't know. I like who I am, and it's part of my personality.
Going back to when you were a child, your mother Esther told me it seemed like the symptoms, to her at least, developed over the course of like a day.
Yeah.
What do you recall from the first time you really felt like something was wrong?
Which happens a lot. You hear that from so many parents. That all of a sudden, boom. Yeah, I mean, it probably didn't happen overnight, because the kid probably recognized it and tried to hide it. But eventually, it starts to get into motion, and it's like, wow, when did that happen? I don't know. I can't put an exact moment, but I remember some sort of head movement or eye movement or twitch, and it happened. I did it a lot, and it was weird and it was odd. I remember a lot of OCD, a lot of counting, a lot of touching, a lot of things like that, again, which just felt probably not normal. They became normal pretty quickly, but it didn't feel normal at the time.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because your mom gave me a few examples of that. She said you'd come in from outside having to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was on the far end of the apartment. Before you'd go to the bathroom, there'd be certain things every time in the room that you had to touch. Or before you would talk to your mom, you had to tap her 3 times on the shoulder.
That was a funny one, yeah.
And she also said you just could not, for the life of you, bear to throw anything away. In all of those instances, like, what are you thinking about that would make you act that way?
I don't know. My mind. I don't think I was thinking. It was just natural. That's what my mind was wanting to do. So there was some pretty funny moments in there.
Was it funny at the time though? I mean, did you realize?
Yeah, I realized, but my mom was great, stuff like that. She just didn't. She did her research on it. She found out stuff, but she just let me be me, which was great. So it wasn't like anyone called me on it, It was just some weird stuff that I was doing.
What do you recall for finding out for the first time that you did have Tourette's?
Nothing. No, nothing. Nothing that was like brimstone and fire. It was just, I think some doctor, some professional put a name to what I was doing, but it wasn't like, for my mom, it was a huge aha moment, like, okay, finally we kind of figured out what this is. But for me, I was just a kid, I was a kid who was about to be a teenager, and, was into girls and sports and my friends, and the fact that what was going on had a name didn't really faze me. It wasn't something I spent a lot of time thinking about.
How did it affect your sleep?
I think it still affects my sleep. I'm not a very good sleeper,
How will it affect it?
I just don't really sleep through the night much. Most athletes don't, but I don't know. Just very interrupted sleep.
How often will you wake up, or how much sleep do you think you get in the average night?
I get some good sleep. I make sure of it now. I don't know, maybe every few hours I'll wake up and roll over, but probably when I was first diagnosed with it, or the onset of TS, probably a lot more. Yeah, not a great sleeper.
Yeah, after you were diagnosed, you go to a clinical psychologist in Connecticut, or in Princeton.
Princeton, yes.
How did that help?
She, I think her name was Dr. Hollander, actually. She gave me forms of, very low-level forms of meditation, and just kind of trying to calm me down before sleep. So in those brief moments before I climbed into bed, just doing some, like I said, low-level meditation to try and bring some calmness over me before I got into my sleep cycle.
And to what extent does that help?
I think it helps. I think meditation helps. I'm not sure. I do it enough. It does help, but
You still do it?
I wish I did it more.
Okay.
I have a good friend who's into meditation, and I always tell him, "You got to teach me." But he's like, you don't really want to learn. I said, "Yeah, no, not really." So.
When are symptoms generally the worst?
Usually right before a game. So that's 24 hours before a match. They're very, very intense.
And what will happen?
Just get super tense. Like my tics and twitches will become heightened more often. I can feel the tenseness in my muscles, and it's normal to me now.
Why not take medication for it? I know that's something you've avoided forever.
You know what? Ages and ages ago, when I was probably a young teenager or just before, we spoke to, my mom and I spoke to a doctor, I think, in New York, and unfortunately, quite a lot of medical professionals don't have it right yet. It's just a concoction of drugs for other ailments, and they kind of take that for a few months, see how it works, lower dosage, lessen the dosage, change the medicine. And at the time, the doctor had said, well, it'll make you drowsy, it'll make you zombie-like, and I just said, even then, I said, I like who I am. I've got great friends, they don't make fun of me,
Sure.
And I don't need to change anything, And that was at a, again, I was a young teenager, but I didn't want to, or maybe I was in my mid-teens. I didn't want to not be who I was.
But it is interesting you mentioned that, because for a while you did apparently try to hide it from friends, family, later on the teammates in press. Why did you feel compelled to do that?
I think a lot. I wasn't very good at hiding it. I think a lot of kids do. Some kids can go two ways with TS, and I've seen it, and I don't think there's a right way. Even now, when I speak to kids and they tell me their stories, some kids are just super brave and bold, and they want to look. This is what they've got a good family unit, and they want to tell their class, and this is who they are, and I think that's wonderful. If you feel that, like I did, it was something that I wanted to suppress and I wanted to hide, and maybe I wasn't brave enough at the time.
How did you try and hide it?
I don't know. I tried to be as still as I possibly could for as long as I possibly could, but again, I don't think it worked very well.
What made you decide to open up and tell people?
Again, I think there was a time when I was at the Metro Stars where I was a backup goalkeeper, and then I became the starting goalkeeper. And I don't know, I think I made a conscious decision that, look, I'm going to be a starting goalkeeper, and I'm going to be on television more, I'm going to be in the press more, and people are going to see it. And so I just, at that point, I just thought there's no reason to hide this anymore, It's not going to be of any use. People are going to see it anyway,
Right.
So, and that gave me a good platform to use that.
How well do you recall the British newspaper headlines when you first signed with Manchester United?
You know what? People have
Talk about ignorant.
Yeah, very ignorant. People have showed it to me. I don't. It was such a whirlwind, with so much going on, that I never picked up the paper when I was in Manchester for my signing and saw the headlines. And people showed it to me, and rightfully so, my family got upset about it, which I would too. I've got children. If that was my son or daughter or brother or whomever, I'd be pissed too. But for me, it was nothing. It was ignorant journalists writing nonsense to try and sell papers, and they still do it today. Nothing's changed,
Right, and more of it for that matter. Yeah. So after your first season with Manchester United, you win Goalkeeper of the Year awards. Your second season, though, mistakes become more frequent. How amazed were you by how quickly opinion of you changed?
Yeah, I think that was a surprise. But it was also part of my learning curve, But it was good. It was good for me. I think the first year at Manchester United, things went flawlessly, and it was brilliant, and that was good to have, But I also think life's about checks and balances, and to have a season where things didn't go my way, it taught me some harsh lessons, but some invaluable lessons.
What were the lessons?
Well, it's just that I needed to improve, and I always knew I needed to improve. But again, there's a professional learning curve, and you get better, and you it's sink or swim. And so I needed to step up to the plate, challenge myself, get better, and learn. And I think I did that.
Well, and it's interesting. Your longtime friend and former coach Tim Mulqueen was telling me how one of the biggest lessons you learned from that experience was that it's a business. What made that sink in?
Well, I think there was a lot of people who I didn't know in and around Manchester United that would, because I knew nothing else, I went in and had immediate success. So they sang my praises and, lots of pats on the back and lots of good mornings. And then when things weren't going so well, the same people who I thought were great, they'd walk past me in the hallway and not say good morning, So I learned very quickly that it was a business, and it was a good lesson.
It's interesting because you've had so much success now with learning about kind of the trying moments that shaped you, and you end up switching teams to another team in England, Everton, in 2006. Your manager at the time was quoted as saying, "Since we signed Tim, he's worked to prove what happened to him at Manchester United was only a learning experience as opposed to what might have led to the downfall of his career." So I wonder, how is your confidence impacted by what happened with Manchester United, and how do you recover from that?
Oh, I think, I've been around, I've had some amazing people in my life, my mother and Tim Mulqueen, who, head down, walk straight ahead and work hard. And I think hard work is, a hard day's work is everything. And that's the only way you get better in any walk of life, is working hard and, not worrying about poor me and all the rest of it, just getting better. I knew I had the talent. It was just about trying to get better each and every day, which I did. I hardly ever missed a day's training. And I also had, I also had a manager in David Moyes who believed in me, which, to have someone who believes. You
said he gave you all the confidence in the world.
Yeah, I love him dearly. I think he's, for me, where I was at my career, again, it was a crossroad, but whether it was big or small, I needed to move on. I needed to plan. I needed to get better. And he gave me the keys. He just said, "Look, I want you to be my goalkeeper. I want you to play." And for a club the size of Everton, which is a big club, that was huge for me. And he always backed me. I played for David Moyes for 7 years, hundreds of games, and he always backed me, always. And I love him dearly. I think he's a brilliant manager, and he was just so instrumental in my career because he gave me that belief that I needed.
What interests you in about working in an MLS front office?
I want to stay in the game. And I think as players, there's when you leave the game, there's different options: coaching, doing television.
And maybe that doesn't interest you anymore. I know a couple of years back, at least.
Yeah, working for a club, working in U.S. soccer. There's a bunch of things that excite me. Just being around the game. I want to be around the game. I love it. It's given me so much, probably more than I could ever give back to it. So, but I would like to do that. I think I have a skill set and knowledge and experience that could help certain clubs or a club, but I've been dabbling in television recently, and I've got the bug for that now. So I'm going to try and learn that trade and get better at it. So
how much do you like that?
I love it. Honestly,
you do?
Yeah. And in fact, I've shied away from doing stuff like that because I just didn't really think it was for me. And I got a pretty brilliant opportunity with NBC, and I just I did it one time. I thought it was going to be a one-off, and then it ended up being eight games, and I've fallen in love with it. I've fallen in love with it because at the time when I started, I knew I wasn't gonna be perfect. So there was gonna be some constructive criticism.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure if I would take that on board or if I'd say, "Listen, the heck with this. I'm too busy. I don't want to." And I've loved it. I've loved it. I've gotten the bug where I get from Pierre Musa, the producer. I get some serious constructive criticism. I take it on board, and I get hungry for the next game to try and make it better.
Like, what do you like about actually doing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I like the nerves. Before I go on camera, I get very nervous, which is a very similar feeling for an athlete that you get before a game. And there's not many things in life that excite me in that way, that give me nerves, that make me really need to step up to the plate and challenge myself. So I think when you find something like that, you have to hold on to it.
Landon Donovan surprisingly left off the U.S. national teams roster. In your opinion, what do you think happened?
Jurgen didn't select them. He thought there was 23 other players suited for the job. You know, I think, unfortunately, what gets lost in the shuffle is that 6 other guys didn't make it either. You know, and those are dear friends of ours, and maybe they don't want to get spoken about, but they've not got talked about. And there's some guys who had real quality, who helped us qualify for the World Cup, and you know, it's part of the business. It's harsh. I know it's harsh, and I've seen it firsthand. But guys get cut, guys move on.
Right.
It's part of what this is.
I mean, but he has been one
Yeah.
of the faces
Yeah.
of, you know, U.S. soccer, and rightfully so. How much do you think was because him and coach just did not see eye to eye?
I mean, you'd have to ask Jurgen Klinsmann that. I don't know, and I'm sure.
Well, but you have to have a little.
Yeah, I've never seen. You know, like Landon's been a consummate professional. You know,
Right.
always has been.
Right.
You know, if they had arguments or beef behind closed doors, that's obviously their personal thing. We as a team never witnessed anything, so you know, I think there's a lot of speculation.
How surprised were the players to learn that Landon Donovan was going to be left off the team?
I don't know. I don't think there was I mean, there was some surprise. I think, you know what? I think there was a surprise that quite a few of the guys were left off. You know, to be honest, there was probably four guys that guys were shocked that didn't make the team. But you know, I think it'd be the other way. If those 4 were on the team and 4 guys who were here got left off, there'd be a surprise. That's what happens when you have to cut 30 guys down to 23.
But this is Landon Donovan. I mean, you also, though, have a very unique perspective and insight on how to handle something like that as well, because you were with Manchester United when the captain was let go, a decision that's far greater than you know what happened with U.S. national team and Landon Donovan. So what do you take from that to use in talking to the national team teammates about what happened?
Yeah, I mean, Roy Keane is the greatest captain in football, you know, and things don't always work out. So, again, I was on a Manchester United team who was experienced and who could handle it, and they weren't rocked by it. And I think this team is the same. I think a lot more is made of it in the media than actually happened. You know, we went back out there a couple hours later and started training and preparing. You know, there was no discussion that needed to be had amongst the players, like, hey, this is what just went on. We knew it was going to be a tough day. We knew that day was coming, that seven of our brothers, our friends, were going to get cut. Yeah, Landon was one of them, unfortunately for him, but it wasn't. I think a lot more was made of it than really actually happened.
There was, you know, in reading about you, obviously you get a stack of profile stories, and there was a March 2013 Sporting News story that was just kind of a scathing profile about the team state at the time, and it said a significant number of Klinsmann's, that being the current coach of the U.S. national team, Klinsmann's players believe they're not being put in a position to play well and win, and that team tactics, rhythm, and chemistry have suffered under his watch. The article, obviously more than a year ago, but looking back, you know, how fair do you think it was at that time?
I've given up trying to figure out the media, you know. It was a witch hunt. We had just lost a game. We tried to tell everybody, you know, when we lost down, it was in Honduras, I think, that there was still another 9 games to go. We proved our worth, and, you know, I think it was just bad journalism. But again, I wasn't there. I had a broken back, and I didn't go to those games. But I was obviously in touch with Clint and Brad Guzan and Michael Bradley, and you know, I think it just pulled the team closer together. It was just
really.
It was one silly art. Well, yeah, we won. We beat Costa Rica and went down to Mexico and got a draw. So, again, we put all that to bed and moved on.
What do you think are the biggest challenges Coach Klinsmann has faced?
Well, I think in general, his style of coaching is to change a lot of things. It's to get his ideas across and wake the players up. He talks about that all the time, putting players in environments where they have to change and adapt and survive. Maybe some of those environments are uncomfortable, but he's happy to do that because he believes in the long run that creates success. So I think, but he's ready for that challenge because he knows going in, when he shakes things up, you're going to have people who you butt heads with and guys who don't agree with it but eventually fall into line. So there's a challenge. I think his biggest challenge was the fact that we've brought in so many Mexican Americans, German Americans, and trying to bleed that group together to become one, because our unity and our chemistry has always been has always been our foundation, our staple. And so we've done a good job of it because this is a really good team, really young team, happy, hungry. Guys work for each other. So, but it's a challenge to do that.
What are the biggest differences between Coach Klinsmann and the former U.S. national team coach, Bob Bradley?
Two guys who I love to play for. I mean, they just have, the tactics aren't terribly different. They're two different individuals with different personalities. So it's hard to kind of compare them, really.
So who do you like playing for more? No, just the blood tests, full-time nutritionist, yoga. What would you say is most unique about Coach Klinsmann's commitment to fitness?
All of it. No, I mean, if you look at him, he takes his shirt off and does a run on the beach. He's fit for a guy his age.
Well, you guys are running around too today with heart rate monitors. Was that common previously, or is that
I mean,
unique
that's kind of a common practice
Okay.
in soccer nowadays. But yeah, I mean, I think he believes in getting an edge. I think he can only coach the way he played, the way he thought he was a winner. If you're a winner, you have ideas on how to win, and he believes that you don't just step on the field and kick a ball, that you gain an advantage over the course of time, doing all the right things, doing lots of different things to gain that edge.
The World Cup, obviously the largest athletic event on the globe. More than 1 billion people watch the World Cup on television live. What does the World Cup mean to you?
For me, for any international player, that's the top. You can't get higher than that. Obviously, in club soccer, you can do some amazing things, but I think anybody will tell you if you do it on the world stage, at the World Cup level, it's the top. It's the best players, it's the best teams in the world. If you're talking about a measuring stick, that's it. And you'll be remembered forever. Good or bad, you'll be remembered forever.
So the U.S. faces Ghana, Portugal, Germany in the draw, all powerhouses. Yeah. To somebody who doesn't know a lot about the World Cup teams and how the tournament works, how would you explain the challenge that presents?
It's a big one. It's a big one. I think anytime you play in a World Cup, you're going to be challenged. I don't think you get to a World Cup and expect a cakewalk. So, the fact that we got a tough group, it's no surprise. I mean, I think any group that the U.S. was in was going to be really tough. So, but again, you look at a team like Germany, probably a team who has a good chance of getting to a final. Portugal has the world's best player,
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yes.
Right.
So, that explains the group all by itself.
I mean, it could have been a little easier draw. Pundits have called Team USA's draw the group of death. Team USA has to finish in the top two to advance. Why do you believe the U.S. is fielding its strongest team ever?
I've said it before. I think we're young. We're younger than we were, or so it seems, in 2010. And with youth, you get that naivety, that aggression, that hunger for success. Look, I think experience is brilliant. I have experience, but I also think experience comes with baggage. The what ifs, the days we lost. All the things that kind of creep into the back of your head sometimes. And it's good. It's good to be young and to be hungry and to be naive. Because you don't know any better. You go out there and you play, and the heck with Cristiano Ronaldo or whoever else plays for Germany. These guys, some of these kids think they're better than that, which is great. That's what you want.
Your expectations for the U.S. national team in the World Cup are what?
Get through the group. We've got 3 games that we know about. We don't know anybody else. We don't know any other opponent. Get through the group and then see who we face and stand toe-to-toe and see what happens. That's the best we can do right now. We don't know anything else.
What do you see needing to happen for the U.S. to legitimately be in contention to win the World Cup?
I think anytime, you even look at the clubs that we play on around the world, the best club teams have the best players and they have a lot of them. So we've got some really top players who can hold their own. The sooner that we can get to 11 top players, 15 top players, that's when we'll really do some damage and be within a shout of lifting a cup.
This will be your 3rd World Cup. Your favorite World Cup memory to date?
Yeah, it would definitely be beating Algeria last World Cup. Everyone knows that, Landon scored. Both teams needed it, so it became less of a soccer match and more of a tennis game, just back and forth. And it was wide open because both teams needed to advance and to score. And Landon scored that late goal, and we remember seeing like scenes on the highlights back home and the bars, people spilling their beers, and it was crazy. We had never seen that before in the U.S. And so it was a pretty cool moment, that we were a part of that, and we got to advance as a group. We actually finished first in the group, so it was cool.
When you throw the torpedo to Landon,
that,
and that goal's regarded as the most famous goal now in U.S. soccer history. A few random items in the remaining moments I have with you. What role would you say faith has played in your life?
A lot. I'm a firm believer in Christ, and I certainly don't hide that. And I think every person, whether you're atheist or not, you have a personal relationship with somebody or something, and mine's with Christ, and I try and live that every day. I'm not perfect, but hence the reason I need Christ.
In one of your Europe Premier League games, an opposing player gets knocked out in the game, and same game ends up coming back to play. Mm-hmm. Why do you think concussions are viewed so much differently in Europe than they are, here in the States now with all the precautions?
Yeah, we're behind. We're behind in Europe. That was a fun. I don't mean funny and haha. It was a crazy time. I mean, some of the debates that I had with even doctors and medical professionals after that game, were mind blowing. Being American,
like what?
Well, just basically the question was, because he's a goalkeeper, the guy who got knocked out. The question was asked to me. Because I argued the guy should come off. He clearly, when you come out of a concussed state, you're clearly aggressive, and he wanted back on the field and all the rest of the signs, and the medical staff let him back on. So the question was asked to me, what would I want to happen? And I just thought it was a stupid question. I said, you're the doctor. I shouldn't have a say in the matter.
Right.
If I showed signs of being concussed and being knocked out, well, I don't think my opinion should count for anything. But again, still having those discussions, which is mind blowing.
Right, because there are studies that have clearly shown the long-term side effects. What do you think should change?
Well, I think more research needs to be done. Anytime you get a massive rule change or change to try and change a way of thinking, you need some bold people in charge to try and pass those laws through.
So what's the deal with you and tattoos?
My hobby.
Doesn't look like you have any on right now, other than
it's
leg.
I'm all over. It's my hobby. I love it. It's an amazing art form.
What's your mom said something interesting when I was talking to her about this. She said, "I'm a firm believer that beauty is in the eye of the beholder."
That's brilliant. I'm sure I get to see that. Every now and again, I'll get excited about one, and she'll say, "Oh, that's nice." Yeah.
What led you to start getting them?
No, I don't know. Like I said, I was drawn to the art form. I love tattoos, even tattoos that I wouldn't necessarily get on my body, and I see them on someone else. I think tattooers are just amazing artists in every single way. From start to finish, the whole process is a beautiful thing. I love it.
Is it true you've gone to a tattoo artist before and just told them to come up with something?
Yeah, I mean, there's I'm trying to think how many times I've done that.
How many times you've done it?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, it depends. There's so many great artists, and when you get an amazing artist, I don't really want to be giving her or him my great artistic ideas because they're not that great, and you see some of the hand sketch drawings of some of these artists are incredible. So, if you're a tattoo collector and you love tattoos, you want original pieces. So, depending on how good the artist is, I give them a little bit of leeway, but most of the time it works out really well.
So how many do you have?
I mean, my whole front's done, almost full sleeves on both arms, and I'm getting a back piece done, which is going to take a long time because it hurts.
Oh, the whole back piece?
Yeah, full back piece.
Really a pleasure, Tim.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.